Imagine you're a weary traveler in the 14th century. The road behind you is long and punishing, mud sucking at your boots, rain plastering your cloak to your back, and the occasional suspicious goose chasing you for reasons known only to itself. Your shoulders ache from carrying your pack. Your stomach grumbles with the memory of bread that was already stale yesterday, and all you want is rest. But forget about soft pillows, clean sheets, or even the faint promise of privacy. Tonight, your bed is a lumpy straw mattress that smells faintly of wet dog. Your companions are strangers who snore like war horns, and your nightlight is a single sputtering tallow candle clinging to life. Welcome to the world of the medieval inn. Now, inns in the Middle Ages weren't exactly the cozy roadside havens we picture today. They were waypoints, half sanctuary, half chaos, where merchants, pilgrims, soldiers, and wanderers all collided under the same roof. An inn was where you went when you couldn't camp under the stars, when wolves prowled too close, or when your body simply refused to take another step. They offered food, drink, and, most importantly, a place to collapse. But rest was a generous word. You'd be sharing your space with chickens, dogs, fleas, and perhaps the kind of stranger you hope will still be a stranger by morning. In this journey, we're stepping through the crooked door of a medieval inn to see what awaited travelers after the sun went down. We'll wander through the smoky common room, climb into the straw heap they called a bed, and listen to the symphony of coughs, snores, and drunken arguments that filled the night. It wasn't luxury, but it was survival. And sometimes, it was entertainment in its own right. And before we begin, welcome to History Lullaby. If this is your first time here, thank you for joining us. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss more strange, darkly, funny, and surprisingly soothing corners of the past. Now, settle in no geese, I promise, as we explore what it was really like to sleep in a medieval inn. The road at dusk is a kind of exhaustion that seeps into the bones. You feel it in your hips, in the grit under your fingernails, in the way the strap of your pack has carved a stubborn groove across your shoulder. There were moments today when you thought you saw the inn sign from far off, only to discover it was a gnarled tree or a scarecrow dangling a broken arm in the wind. So when the actual sign finally appears, an uneven plank swinging from a bent iron bracket, you stop, blink, and make sure this one doesn't walk away. The board is painted with an animal that could be a boar, or a bear, or a dog after a difficult day. It scarcely matters. What matters is the glow leaking through shutters, the little ribbons of light that mean there's a hearth, and therefore heat, and therefore a chance your fingers will stop aching. What matters is the jumble of roof lines stitched with thatch, the smell of smoke and roasting meat muscling its way down the lane to meet you. You step through the low gate into a yard churned to pudding, hoof prints, cart gouges, and a confetti of straw gone dark with rain. A boy barely old enough to hold the reins jogs up to take your animal if you have one. If not, he jogs up anyway to ask if you might be persuaded into paying for the privilege of having nothing. A goose. Every inn has one tyrant goose. Stalks the yard with the authority of a sheriff, inspecting newcomers, hissing at ankles, and threatening litigation with its beak. Beyond, a stable roof leans like a tired shoulder against the inn proper, and from within comes the thud of hooves, the soft thunder of a horse shaking itself, the rustle of hay being forked into mangers. The smells here are accord: pitch and wet wool, muddy leather and dung, the high animal sweetness of hay, the salt of sweat, the faint tin tang of damp iron. Worn as you are, the sum of them reads as welcome. The door stands open, a hand's width, breathing out warmth. Candlelight licks at the threshold like a promise you almost don't dare believe. Inside, the world changes from gray to amber. A fire the size of a small argument crouches in the hearth, throwing up sparks whenever a log shifts its weight. Low beams pull the ceiling close. Their undersides are cured black from years of smoke. The air is busy with scents, tallow, ale, onions browning, a hint of something meaty that might be pork, or might be an animal too secret to name. Tallow candles squat in iron spikes along the walls, their flames shivering with every draft shouldered through the room. Shadows wheel and stretch over plaster, turning a wall peg into a pointing finger, a broom into a hunched old woman eavesdropping. Noise is not a backdrop, but a living animal. Tankards clack like wooden teeth. Dice patter in a wooden bowl with the dry, grainy hiss of sand. Boots scrape, benches complain. A fiddler saws at a tune that will not be kept down, though he plays as if the bow and the song have only recently been introduced. A dog coughs beneath a table. Somewhere, a patron laughs too loud at humor that might not survive daylight. From the corner, the steadier metronome of a man hacking at a cough. No one pauses for it. Illness is a constant, like rain or taxes. The innkeeper materializes out of it all with the presence of a stage manager and the patience of a saint who has seen too much. He is wide in the middle and nimble at the edges, with an apron that remembers every stew of the last decade and eyes that miss nothing. His greeting is a nod that contains 3 words. What'll it be? And also an unspoken arithmetic. How much can you pay? How much work will you make me do? Will you be trouble? His wife. Perhaps his wife, perhaps a sister. Perhaps the sole reason anything here functions moves through tables, as if the floor understands her feet. She pours and scolds, ladles and listens, accepts coins with a clack and a glance. When a soldier attempts a joke with a hand that travels too far, her ladle taps his knuckles with the light authority of a magistrate's gavel. There is order here, but of the flexible sort. A warp of routine with a weft of improvisation. Your first decision is not bed but bench. You're given a wedge of seat between a pilgrim counting beads with the speed of a gambler and a merchant quietly instructing his ledger that today went better than it actually did. The table bears scars and stories, burn marks, knife scores, a grove where someone has carved a game board and dared fate to let it be. Bread arrives dense enough to stun a mouse into stew that has the good manners to be hot. It tastes of onion and smoke and relief. A slab of cheese leans against your trencher like a tired friend. Ale follows brown, honest, slightly sour, and safer than the well. From time to time, the door stutters open to let in another gust of weather shaped like a person. Cloaks drip. Dogs rise to sniff the news written in mud. A Reeves man with mud on his hem. A pair of sisters, their skirts damp to the knee. A carter with a wheelband tucked under one arm like a broken halo. Each arrival draws half the room's attention and then releases it again, like a wave that knows where the beach ends. When you signal for lodging, the innkeeper makes a face that is both apology and price. Beds are a finite country. Boarders are negotiated nightly. He tilts his head toward a door that opens onto a narrower world, a passage of packed earth and timber. Then a room where the heat dulls and the smell changes from stew and smoke to wool and breath and a faint suggestion of wet dog. Here, the technology of sleep is on full display. Straw mattresses are heaped along 2 walls, some tied into ticks, some corralled by boards, some simply islands of hay domed by the weight of sleepers. A few are already occupied, boots on, belts fastened, purses tucked under armpits with the care one reserves for a second heart. A child has found his mother's hand even in sleep, fingers hooked like a little crab. A cat occupies a mattress's center, the way royalty occupies a throne, with utter confidence that the universe arranged itself for this moment. The cat blinks at you with a gaze that says, "You may rent, but I own." The economics of space are calculated in warmth, not square feet. Closer to the hearth hole, where a second, smaller fire smolders, the mattresses command a premium. The edges are priced in drafts and patience. You do the math you can afford. A pile 3 from the fire, near a wall that leaks a thread of cold like a warning. Your coin makes a muted, decisive sound in the innkeeper's palm. He gestures you into an arrangement you immediately understand. There will be elbows. There will be shared blankets. There will be a consensus every hour about what constitutes your half. Negotiation is its own art. A traveling tinker already on the mattress, his hair smelling of forge smoke and rain nods and shifts a handspan to the left. An offering. A pilgrim arrives late with a rosary that clicks like a slow insect. He too is offered a sliver of the perimeter. Blankets are a commons, pooled and redistributed by the immutable laws of thermal injustice. The heaviest wool edges creep inexorably toward the fattest sleeper. You add your cloak to the top with a sigh that's half prayer, half concession. A procession of details passes. The way straw, even old straw, still contains the memory of field and sun. The near-silent applause of mice somewhere behind the wall. The slight huffing breath of the dog that has installed itself at your feet with grave assurance. There are hooks for cloaks, a peg for a belt, a chest in the corner that does not invite curiosity. On a beam over the door, A dried bundle of herbs, rosemary perhaps, or rue swings with the draft, a whispering charm against fleas, or dreams, or the other things to which people prefer not to give names. A last cup finds your hand. The innkeeper's wife passes through, collecting bowls, her gaze a quick census. Who will need waking early? Who has a cough that merits more broth? Who has that look around the eyes that precedes trouble? Her hand drops a heel of bread by the sleeping child. She tucks a blanket corner under a shoulder with 2 fingers, and no fuss. She has done this thousands of nights. Back in the common room, the fiddler changes tempo. Gambler's luck rises and breaks on the same reef it always does. Someone tells a story too large to fit inside the building. Someone else swears to a smaller truth that lands with more weight. In the sleeping room, bodies make a polite clatter of settling. Belts creak. Straw exhales. A knee learns the exact shape of a knot in the floor that it will know intimately by morning. You adjust, then adjust again, then accept. Your final choice is comic and consequential. A straw mattress beside 3 strangers, or the warm flagstones near the hearth in the common room, which would be perfect if not for the 5 chickens who also believe in radiant heat. The mattress wins. You are tired of conversations with poultry. As you lie down, the world shrinks to a geography of immediate concerns. Which side you'll roll to when the elbow lands. How to calculate breathing and time with a stranger's snore so that his rhythm becomes yours. How to fold your cloak edge so that a thief would need to dislocate your shoulder to lift your purse. Across the room, someone mutters a prayer in a language you do not speak. You offer your own, in the language you have. No one in this room will sleep well. Everyone in this room will sleep enough. And in the arithmetic of medieval travel, that's profit. Your last thought before the candle gutters is practical and ridiculous at once. If the cat decides your chest is prime real estate, do not, under any circumstances, try to negotiate. Your options are a straw mattress with 3 strangers, or the floor by the fire with 5 chickens. Choose wisely. There's a moment in every communal bed when you understand the physics of warmth and the sociology of compromise. It arrives right after the rustle of settling, when the mattress stops pretending to be separate, and the people on it stop pretending not to notice one another. Heat begins to pool in the hollows, where 3 bodies fail to be square. Drafts are mapped by involuntary shivers. The blanket becomes a contested border that advanced a thumb width while you blinked. This is not your bed. It is a treaty compacted into straw. Start with head count. Tonight's roster: the tinker with smoke on his clothes and the look of a man who has argued all day with iron. The pilgrim who clutches a carved wooden cross, the way a drowning man clutches driftwood. You, whose knees have formed a committee to draft grievances about the road. And the dog, who is no one's and therefore everyone's, arranged into a cinnamon coil at the foot like a punctuation mark indicating finality. It is possible there is also a cat. The cat will reveal itself when it chooses to claim eminent domain. Position is politics. The wealthy favor the hearth-adjacent plots for reasons that need no explanation. You, who have paid modestly and arrived late, take a spot a few bodies back, where the fire's message has been translated through several dialects of flesh and wool. The edges are ideals. Cool in summer, allegedly. Drafty in winter, definitely, and favored by those who prefer an exit within reach. The center is gravity. The heaviest sleeper rolls there eventually, dragging blanket and narrative like a tide. Straw democratizes and betrays. Even well threshed, it keeps its memory of seed, of stalk, of being alive, and it expresses those memories through prickle. A good tick, a stout linen sack, keeps most barbs at bay. Tonight's tick has seen better seasons and worse fires. Straw shifts under weight with the 1,000-voiced whisper of a dry field in a wind. Your shoulder discovers a place the floor rises to meet it. Your hip names a point on the earth you will not easily forget. You make a pillow from your cloak, which is to say you make a promise to your neck that you cannot fully keep. And then there are the small citizens of straw. Fleas are democrats of an uncompromising sort. They do not count coin or courtesy. They do not note badges or oaths. They simply write their itches across the topography of your ankles, then your calves, then, if you are unlucky and insufficiently armored, your belly, which will become a constellated map by morning. Lice are more intimate and persistent. preferring the politics of hair. You will meet them in time. For now, scratching would risk disturbing the blanket's precarious ceasefire. You negotiate with yourself. Ignore, 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 relent. Personal space here is a medieval concept, by which I mean it exists primarily in manuscripts. You will be touched. A stranger's forearm will cross the border and rest on your ribs, as if your body were a side table left conveniently within reach. A knee will nudge the back of your thigh, asking politely. Then, less so for you to make a little more room. You will become aware of the exact length of the tinker's breath and the pilgrim's quiet, fervent muttering. Your own breathing will choose a tempo that disagrees with both. You will coax it toward theirs to keep the air between you from feeling argumentative. There is comedy in this. There must be, or you would cry. The pilgrim, halfway to sleep, tugs half your cloak with the slow entitlement of a spouse who has decided vows included blanket annexation. "Good night," he murmurs. He says it in a tone that implies you've been married for 15 years, and there is nothing left to negotiate. The tinker emits a snore that starts small and becomes a philosophy. He apologizes with a grunt the first time, then decides that if you can sleep through a forge, you can sleep through anything. The dog dreams with its paws, jogging in place toward a rabbit it will never catch. One paw thumps your ankle. You choose humor over homicide. Animals are not intruders here. They are infrastructure. A dog is a heat engine with a bark alarm. A cat is a self-heating muffler with claws. Occasionally, a chicken does roost at the foot in winter, its dinosaur toes surprisingly effective at kneading warmth into numb human toes. Tonight, the innkeeper had the sense to shut the birds in the lean-to, but feathers still drift like a memory. The dog, having conducted a survey, decides your feet are a suitable peninsula on which to moor. It sighs into final arrangement. You accept your new role as a dock. Conversation fades, then resurges in pockets. A pair 2 mattresses over whispers about bandits on the northern road and whether the bishop's men truly hang smugglers by their sashes. Someone near the far wall offers a prayer to St. Christopher that includes an itemized list of roads traveled and knees injured, as if the saint were a clerk. From the common room, music leaks like warm broth through a cracked door. A chorus rises and falls with the reliable confidence of men who have learned the second verse by inventing it. Heat collects. You feel it rising in the mattress like bread. Your nose knows someone's boots have not recently considered a stream. Your eyes decide the dark can be negotiated with. The itch in your calf presents arguments for attention that are both passionate and specific. You compromise, a single, satisfying scratch whose relief is both immediate and dangerous. Do not teach your fingers bad habits. They learn quickly and repeat at scale. Hierarchies within the bed enforce themselves with a mixture of etiquette and physics. The merchant with the heavy purse sleeps guarded, hand on pouch, back to the wall. The wall obliges by being cold and impartial. The pilgrim surrenders to sleep with the resignation of a man who has walked too far to interrogate comfort. His prayers fall into silence, that is, if not peace, at least a truce. You, somewhere in the middle, practice a medieval yoga that involves folding your knees at an angle your joints did not previously admit. It's astonishing what ligaments will agree to when reminded of the alternative night air that bites to the bone. At intervals, the bed moves in a choreography of unconscious negotiation. Someone flips to his other side. The blanket migrates west. A hand emerges to retrieve it, then retreats, empty or triumphant. You learn that a blanket shared equitably at midnight will by 2 o'clock have chosen its favorite. You will wake exactly twice to reclaim your half. You will succeed precisely once. There is always a moment when you consider the firelit flagstones and imagine you can strike a better bargain with chickens. You cannot. The second sleep, if the inn's rhythm follows the countryside's, will arrive after a small islands of wakefulness. Around midnight, the cougher in the corner sits up, drinks, coughs again. The dog lifts its head to assess meaning. Hearing none, it returns to the rabbit. Someone pads to the door, a careful silhouette against the amber from the common room, and you choose to trust that their errand is a chamber pot and not your coin. You consider all the ways money can be fastened to a body without injuring circulation. You have tried most of them. Your mind makes room for superstition in the hour when sense is tired. You avoid lying flat on your back because you were told once that the dead prefer that posture. You curl slightly to inform any passing spirits you're not auditioning. A sprig of something, lavender, is tucked into the tick near your cheek. It speaks of someone's earlier hope for gentler dreams. From a beam hangs a little crosscut from ashwood. It twirls slowly in the draft, which you decide is holy breath, not a gap in the door. And yes, there are thieves. Not here, perhaps not tonight, but the knowledge of them sleeps beside you like another body. You learn the thief-proof sleeping grip. Purse twisted in your belt. Belt looped through your cloak. Cloak tucked under your thigh. Thigh draped by the pilgrim's elbow. Pilgrim held in place by the tinker's inexorable snore. If he steals from you now, he deserves the purse as payment for audacity. Humor survives everything. When the pilgrim, half-dreaming, mutters, "Move over, love," you angle an eyebrow into the darkness and consider whether to answer always or already have. When the tinker's snore ceases and briefly resembles a goose, the yard tyrant answers faintly from its pen, and the room takes a collective breath of laughter without waking. When the dog farts without remorse, the room achieves a moment of equality. Even the wealthy near the hearth are mortal. The shared bed is not a quaint custom. It's a machine that turns bodies into heat and strangers into a cohort. In the morning, you will look at these people, this man whose elbow had opinions, this dog who deputized your feet, this pilgrim who annexed half your blanket by eminent domain. And you will feel a solidarity that was not present at supper. Not affection, precisely, but an understanding. We did this ridiculous necessary thing together and none of us died of cold. At some point, the mattress finds its balance, a precarious plateau in which every limb has negotiated its final position. Your ears accept the bed's language, the straw's whispers, the breath's soft saw, the dog's intermittent rabbit pursuit. A floorboard scolds somewhere. A log drops in the hearth outside with a muffled, convincing sigh. Your last thought slides over humor into gratitude, because sleep, this strange, crowded, itchy, absurd sleep, is arriving. A stranger claims half your blanket and wishes you good night as if you're married now. You do not argue. In this bed tonight, you sort of are. Night in the inn doesn't arrive so much as it gathers layer upon layer, like blankets tossed onto a sleeping body, until you can no longer tell where warmth ends and weight begins. The first layer is ale. It darkens the room like dusk in a mug, turning rough voices mellow, sanding off the sharper edges of pride and injury. The second layer is heat. The hearth, banked but ambitious, pushes its orange breath across faces and tankards and the wet shine of the tabletop. The third layer is sound, a tide that rises quietly at first, then spills, then thunders, then somehow finds its own shore again. You nurse your second mug and watch the room arrange itself for the evening's theater. A dice cup appears, wooden, thick-lipped, stained where someone once steadied it with hands still tacky from stew. The cup rolls across the table with the proprietary swagger of a captain on his own deck. Knucklebones clack onto the boards like small, articulate beetles. A pair of men lean in, one in a felt hat, with the nervous eyes of a man who believes the world owes him a little luck, and one in a sleeveless jerkin whose forearms are complicated with scars. Wakers begin low buttons, a coin or two. A feed of gossip then grow larger as the room warms to the notion that luck can be bullied. "Throw again," says the jerkin, and the cup obeys. The innkeeper ambles past, gaze flattening the game with a look that says, "I will allow this so long as it buys more ale than trouble." He taps the staff he keeps near his leg. A lazy thump that is less a threat than a reminder that physics still exists. At the far bench, cards slapped down, thick homemade pasteboards, corners soft with use, face paint gone foggy with the oils of too many hands. A woman with wrists like yoke pins deals with the confidence of a woman who has met most men and concluded she can take their money without learning their names. Stories climb onto the tables alongside the mugs. They arrive the way cats do, uninvited, inevitable, and completely certain they were asked for. A peddler with bells stitched to his hat lifts his tankard and begins a tale about a bridge tollman who charged a ghost and was paid in cold breath and regrets. A carter interrupts with a better one. The noble who wore a piglet as a muff to fool a bishop and got away with it for 3 winters. Each tale is a ladder that someone else is obliged to climb. Each rung is an embellishment, a flourish, a swear to God that it happened exactly so. The room has a music long before the musician begins. The percussion of mugs set down in applause. The drone of voices finding their pitch. The tabor of boots drumming impatience under the bench. But then the fiddler stands. He has the ribs of his instrument tucked into the crook of his jaw like a well-kept secret. The bow has been repaired twice, once by string, once by prayer. He draws the first note, and the room tilts its head as if the sound were a scent. His opening tune is a trotting thing, built for stamping, friendly to clapping, the sort of melody that makes you feel you know the chorus, even if you've never heard it. Hands answer, feet answer, even the dog answers, thumping its tail with a beat so committed it could serve on the parish drum. The fiddler grins without stopping. The bow saws, hops, and slides. A second musician materializes. A fellow with a pipe no larger than a child's thigh bone, who can coax from it a thin silver stream that threads the thicker stew of the fiddle. When a third joins, a tabor and pipe player who somehow plays both at once, one hand drumming, the other piping. The room laughs just to see him. Dancing in a room with too little floor is a form of spiritual discipline. People stand anyway. A soldier with scars like punctuation along his cheek offers a hand to a woman with flour still on her sleeve. She accepts, wiping her palms on her apron with a shrug that says, "Why not?" The space between benches becomes a lane. The lane becomes a circle. The circle becomes two, wheels turning in opposite directions until someone collides and the room roars. A boy, stable boy by day, fleet-footed at night. Threads between legs with a tray of mugs and the balance of a cat on a fence. Everything loosens. Voices pitch up a note. The dice grow braver. The cards grow slicker. A pilgrim who swore he would drink only water is caught compromising with ale and theology, arguing that barley blessed by boiling is practically a sacrament. A merchant's account book reappears as if summoned. He jots a figure in the margin, then jots it again larger, then closes the book as if to keep the better numbers safe. Someone begins a bawdy song and is shushed by the innkeeper's wife not because of modesty, but because she prefers a different bawdy song in a better key. At your elbow, a man tells you about a saint who borrowed sleep from the devil and paid it back during Lent. At your other elbow, a woman tells you about a miller who trained a goose to bite only tax collectors. The goose in the yard, hearing itself discussed, honks once in a tone that suggests litigation remains on the table. Laughter drifts through the cracks, is caught by the rafters, and drips back onto the crowd like condensed weather. The fiddler shifts to a slower air, and the room's heartbeat follows. You can feel the history in it, the way a melody carries the memory of fields even into timber and smoke. Heads lean together, words soften. A man in a corner whose cough has been a metronome all evening forgets it for the length of a verse. For a moment, a tired day acquires a little varnish. For a moment, even the dice players listen with their hands resting on the cup. Then someone bangs a tankard and the room rights itself. Cheerful as a ship shrugging off a wave. The dice tumble again. A local ballad takes the floor. Too many verses, all of them necessary to the man who knows them. He is joined by 3 who know the chorus and 9 who don't, but will not be excluded. The innkeeper's wife harmonizes with a spoon against a mug. She does not sing out loud, but the room is improved by whatever music she holds in reserve. Not all noise is celebratory. An argument skids into being at the edge of the card table. Cheating. Always cheating, whether real or imagined. Voices rise and harden. A bench screeches backward. A hand blurs. Before the swing lands, the innkeeper is there, staff angled in a geometric proposition that proves force is unnecessary when authority is so excellently shaped. Out, he says to one. Sit, he says to the other. To both, he says, pay. The room breathes out, and the musicians have the sense to slide into a tune that mocks nobody and forgives everything. Food continues to arrive like punctuation between songs. Trenchers of stew, a pie that has surrendered its lid in a hot, flaking sigh. Skewers of something that was once proud to crow at dawn. The smell is persuasive. Even the pious become pragmatic. Dogs perform miracles of timing, appearing beneath the hand of the most generous diners at the exact angle that makes dropping food feel like fate. Outside, the yard keeps its own rhythm. Hoof iron ticks against a stone. Somewhere, a cart settles with a groan like a man lowering himself into a chair after bad news. The stable boy whistles a few notes of the fiddler's tune without realizing it. A moon tries the door latch, finds it barred, and hangs a pale coin of light on the thatch. The goose patrols. The cold declares that it will wait. Inside, the gossip begins its second wind, which is always better than the first because it has gathered more truth and more invention on the way around the room. News gallops faster than any horse. A market flooded with bad salt, a reeve found drunk in a dovecote, a lord's son who married a woman who can brew beer that won't sour even if you shout at it. These things matter. You tuck them away with the instinct of a traveler who understands that a good story on the next road is worth more than a good coin. Eventually, gravity remembers its job. Drinkers droop. Dancers drift toward benches with the slow surrender of soldiers answering reveille in reverse. The fiddler plays one last tune for the benefit of his own hands. Something small and clever with a twist that makes the dog tilt its head. He nods to the tabor player, to the piper, to the room, to himself. He tucks the instrument into its sack as gently as you might put a sleeping child into a bed you hope will be warmer than yours. But the music doesn't end. It thins and threads through the boards. It climbs the stair you cannot see and lies down along the rafters. It squeezes under the door to the sleeping room like a cat that refuses to accept barriers. There, among the straw and the murmurs, it becomes another layer. A soft, persistent pulse beneath breath and turning bodies. You try to sleep in that bleached half-light of tallow where nothing is dark enough to be spared interpretation. You fail at first because the inn has other instruments. The man with the cough resumes, conducting his lungs with the authority of a bishop ringing for the sacristan. Someone's snore begins humbly and gains ambition, collecting overtones until it resembles a smithy with the bellows misplaced. Another snore answers from across the room in a slightly different key. Together they form a duet nobody asked for, and everyone will remember. Think of it as an early version of surround sound, snoring in stereo. A child whimpers. The mother's hand, expertly guided by instinct alone, finds the child's brow and smooths it as if ironing a crease out of the night. The dog, deep in a different theater, barks once at a rabbit only it can see and thumps its tail in the straw to signal the victory. A chicken, damn it, there is a chicken protests in its sleep with a muffled, irritable burr, then quiets, head tucked, having forgiven the world without consulting it. From the common room comes the metallic jingle of a spoon dropped into a mug and the soft, scolding cluck of the innkeeper's wife discovering it. She moves with a different music, now quiet, efficient, the rhythm of cleanup. Mugs stacked into towers of clay and wood, trenchers scraped, coals nudged into a red hush. She hums under her breath. Not a song you know, not a song for performance, but the kind of tune that keeps hands moving and temper sweet. A verse for wiping, a verse for sweeping, a verse for tying the door latch against all the stray cats who believed they were promised a late supper. Somewhere, a guest retches discreetly in a corner bucket, the universal language of regret. Another guest mutters an apology to a saint and promises an offering at the shrine if only the room will stop shifting its angle to the floor. A third sleeps the sleep of the contentedly penniless, having lost his coins to the jerkin and found in the loss a strange, simple peace. Outside, frost is limbing the yard in an alphabet only cartwheels can read. You pull your cloak higher, find the pilgrim's hand has stolen a palm's breadth of fabric in an annexation negotiated entirely during dreams. You let him keep it. Warmth is a communism that even the wealthy adopt when the night comes hard. Hours slide. The fire in the common room sighs itself smaller, exhaling the last of its muscle. The embers turn their faces to the center as if listening to something older than heat. The noise dims, but never dies. A floorboard tells on somebody headed for the privy. The privy door replies, with a hinge like a small animal in need of oil and affection. On the far side of the sleeping room, someone begins a new snore in a time signature the others must accommodate. Good beds become orchestras whether they wish to or not. And you, eyes pinched against smoke and laughter and the memory of the fiddler's second tune, find the curve of the straw that will carry your spine through the last watch of the night. You accept that sleep here is stitched, not woven, a patchwork of dozes sewn with threads of interruption. But you have warmed the narrative. You have added your breath to the chorus, your coin to the pot, your ears to the stories. For one evening and 2 partial sleeps, you are part of the inn's biography, and it has added a page to yours. Just before you drift, the door to the common room opens a crack. The innkeeper peers in only a silhouette, shoulders squared by duty. He counts heads by habit, not greed, by the instinct of a man who once woke to ashes and vowed never again. He nods to the room, to the dog, to the beam and the bundle of herbs the wife insists on renewing with the seasons. He shuts the door against the draft and leaves the night to its arrangements. The last sound you hear is not a cough or a snore, but a whisper two travelers trading the final crumbs of a story under the blankets, half giggle, half confession, the kind of pointless, perfect conversation that can happen only at the edge of sleep. In the morning, you will forget the details and remember only that you were, for a few hours, crowded into the human comedy until you overflowed with it. And you will carry that fullness onto the road like a second cloak, heavier than wool and twice as warm. By the time the last tune collapses into embers and the dice are swept like bones toward whatever fate has claimed them, the inn tries to remember what it is at heart, a place to survive the dark. The trouble is, darkness has its own ideas. You feel it the moment the common room thins, when laughter loosens its grip and men begin to take stock of their valuables the way sailors count oars after a storm. The first ritual is practical. Purses are tested, thong-pulled, not retied, the leather pouch tucked beneath a belt or threaded under a tunic, then tugged twice to make sure. The very cautious sew a coin into the hem of a sleeve or a seam in the hood. The very unlucky discover they meant to and didn't. A few sleep with boots on not because they expect to run, but because coin hidden under a heel is coin a cut purse must work to find. The old hands lay their dagger between straw and wall blade turned away, hilt warm against the palm if they roll over. The innkeeper notices the small choreography and approves. It means he might have a quieter night. Doors are barred, but bars are not always enough. The innkeeper drags the great oak beam into its brackets, shoulders against it like a plowman heaving a stump. He sets a wedge under the latch and a second wedge under the shutter that rattles in east wind. No candles upstairs, he calls. Half rule, half prayer. The wife makes her rounds with a wet cloth and a long-handled spoon, snuffing tallow wicks that sulk into smoke, pressing lids onto embers to bank them under ash. You may have heard that the curfew bell couvre-feu once told a town to cover its fires. At the inn, it still does, even when no bell rings. By the hearth, a rank of bucket pails sits like a little militia of water and hope. Fights, if they're going to happen, tend to hatch now out of eggs laid earlier. Cheating sours into accusation. Accusation ferments into bruises. A bench goes over. Someone stands too quickly and the world tilts. His fist misses the face it sought and strikes the heavy post that has been here longer than any quarrel. Before it can bloom, the innkeeper is there, staff held like an argument that has already been won. He doesn't shout. He names 2 men tomorrow's problem, deposits one on the step outside with his boots in his hands, and sets the other under a table with a jug of water as if he were an unruly fire that needs cooling. Peace, such as it is, returns by the old road, slow and muddy, but reliable. Thieves do not love noise, but they love crowds. A traveling rogue will try on honesty the way a man tries on a borrowed cloak, with caution and an eye for escape. He eats, nods at the prayers, pays for a mug, and waits. He watches who guards their purse and who forgets. He watches which pack is tied with a bad knot, which belt pouch sags with wishful weight. If he is clever, he isn't a cut purse at all. He is a hooker, sliding a length of bent iron down between floorboards or through a sleeping room gap, fishing a bundle toward him inch by praying inch. The innkeeper knows these arts by their shadows. He has placed bell-tied strings across certain cracks. You, learning from the room, nestle your pack beneath your head and fold an arm through the strap, as if the strap were a lover who might wander. For all the bars and buckets and staffs, much of the inn's peace is negotiated with heaven. When the last mugs have been stacked and the last stew scraped from the trencher, voices drop into litany. A pilgrim draws the sign of the cross on the rough wood above his straw, with a thumb still greasy from supper. He whispers a paternoster. Once, twice, because once feels like haste. A woman loosens a small leather pouch around her neck and reveals a chipped medal of St. Christopher. Her lips brush it the way one kisses the brow of a child. Not for the saint's sake, but for their own. A carter traces a little cross on each boot heel and mutters, "Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, bless the bed that I lie on." If the rhyme belongs more to a later century, the impulse belongs to all of them. Someone recites Psalm 4, soft as breath. In pace inadipsum dormiam et requiescam. In peace I will lie down and sleep. And another answers with the last lines of the Salve Regina. A stable lad, not much given to Latin, tucks a sprig of rosemary under his bundle for steady dreams. Herbs hang from beams not purely for smell. The wife had tied them in summer. Bundles of mint and lavender for sweetness. Rue and mugwort for whatever haunts the threshold between sleep and elsewhere. A hagstone sea-tumbled rock with a hole in its heart dangles near the door to confuse anything that comes hunting breath. There is iron in the room on purpose. A horseshoe nailed over the lintel. A knife laid crosswise beneath a baby's straw. No one agrees on which charm works, so everyone tries all of them. This is theology by accretion. Practical as a roof, patched with whatever will keep the rain out. When breath slows and bodies find the small deals they will make with discomfort, the whispering begins, first to God, then to each other, then to whatever listens in the rafters. You catch a story unspooling from the bench across the room where a pair of peddlers have negotiated a corner of warmth. One speaks of a crossroads a day's walk south where a woman in white will follow any traveler who looks back. She means no harm, he insists, so long as you never speak to her. The other shakes his head. His white woman lives near a ford and takes a toll in dignity. Mud up to the waist if you don't leave a coin on the bank. In the far corner, a tinker tells a quieter horror that isn't horror at all. A mare that rides your chest so you cannot move nightmare, old as the language itself, and how a cold iron key under the tongue will send her away. The room is very certain that it will not try this, but very grateful to know it. Ghosts are not the only customers at a tavern's hour before second sleep. There are willow, the wisps that bob above marshes and lead fools into deeper water. There is the wild hunt, which nobody names too loudly lest the dogs on the roof prickle and begin to bay. A soldier swears that on a march in Flanders, he heard the sky full of horses at midnight, and that two men who laughed about it fell ill the next day and died upright like stacked firewood. A woman counters with a small mercy. St. Julian the Hospitaller, patron of innkeepers and travelers, whose image carved above a door will keep wolves out of the yard. And, sometimes, men from worse. The innkeeper touches the little wooden saint he's nailed to the beam and, for once, does not scoff. Can't sleep? Someone whispers to a friend whose eyes stare too white in the dim. Try counting saints instead of sheep. It's holier and no livestock required. They begin Christopher, George, Michael, Nicholas, Margaret, Catherine, until the list becomes laughter, and the laughter becomes drowsy, and the drowsiness becomes, if not sleep, then something pointed toward it. Fire, meanwhile, is the room's oldest worry and newest. You hear it in the timbers, soft, satisfied creaks as heat leaves and cold returns. Tallow candles sour into curls of smoke. The wife teases into dying with a wet cloth and a look that could extinguish a bonfire. She leaves only the ember glow on the hearth, a low red animal that will live until morning if coaxed with ash and patience. Still, every draft is a warning, every spark a prophecy. Roofs are thatch, walls are timber, mattresses are straw, and so the mind rehearses. Your hand on the pack strap, the innkeeper's shout, the path to the door, the bucket line to the well. You see in your head a drill. You pray not to perform. Thieves rarely try the door now. They try the window, if there is one, or the stable loft where the boards are soft like bread and slot around nails that remember when they were trees. A clever rogue might take the privy path and lift the latch of the back kitchen with a twist of wire. But cleverness has met its match in a wife who strings little bells on a bit of linen and ties it to the inner latch-one-fool tug, and the room rings like a tiny church. If someone still slips through, you hope it is only a child nimble with hunger and not a man nimble with malice. You sleep in layers, the way the night adds itself. First, you practice stillness. Face away from the door. Dagger hilt of familiarity beneath the palm. Purse strap looped around your wrist. Then you allow a thin doze. The sort that wakes if a bench sighs wrong. The room teaches you which noises are harmless. The seam of the wall knitting against cold. The dog reorganizing its dream. A chicken deciding life is tolerable. Only when the inn itself seems to sleep. When the hearth sigh is even, and the snoring duet has settled into something like music, do you let yourself sink. Even then you do not drop. You are lowered, hand over hand, by caution, into a pit shallow enough to climb out of in a heartbeat. Halfway to second sleep, the stories change color. The bright one's goose-biting tax collector, bishop fooled by piglet muff fate. The darker ones arrive on softer feet. A farmhand tells of a man who laughed at holy wells and woke with his mouth full of frogs. A girl recalls a traveler who stole a loaf in Lent and found the loaf bleeding. The tales are not meant for belief so much as for border marking. Here is where safety ends. Here is where humility begins. They are fences built from words against fields nobody owns. The superstitions have a domesticity to them that comforts even as it pricks. A mother pats the child's chest 3 times, northeast, south, and whispers the name of a saint her grandmother favored. A sailor sleeps with a coil of line under his head because he has never learned to sleep without weight. A mason uses his last waking strength to square and level his little nest of straw habit more than necessity. And in the morning he will wake grateful that the world is still plumb. Habit itself is a charm, and the inn is full of it. The wife's last circuit with the spoon. The host's count of heads from the doorway. The traveler's shared nod when the door bar seats with a satisfying thud. Not every fear is imagined. Somewhere down the road, a band of men has learned that inns can be barns for human cattle. They've taken to pushing in at midnight, shouting watchwords and counting the seconds until panic makes sense of their confusion. Tonight is not that night. Tonight the geese are suspicious, and the dogs are sober. But the knowledge hangs in the rafters. You sleep with your body teaching you what your mind already knows. That rest is a risk calculated against other risks, and that the sum changes with weather, coin, company, and the angle of the moon. It helps to remember whose roof you're under. The innkeeper is not only a publican, and not only a sheriff when he must be, he is also a warder of flame and a broker of peace. His wife is the quartermaster of comfort and the bishop of cleanliness. Between them they have outlived a fire, a pox, a lean year, and 3 generations of men who believe the rules were for other men. They keep a pail by every door because once a pail wasn't there. They keep a staff by the bench because once a staff was needed, and far. They keep a bucket in the sleeping room because the privy is not an argument to be had at night in winter when wolves are pleased with themselves. Near morning the saints win, or fatigue does. It is the same victory by a different name. The last of the wakeful minds releases its grip. Dreams slip into the gaps superstition left. Kind dreams and clumsy ones. Dreams of old food and new roads and the shape of a home that changes every time you remember it. Even those who intended to stay vigilant discover that vigilance naps. The inn becomes a choir of sleeping animals with one ear turned toward the door. If you wake, because someone turned, because your wrist reminded you of the purse strap, because a coal collapsed into a red smile, you do what everyone else does. You take inventory. Purse, pack, blade, boots, elbow room, blanket, neighbor, door bar, ember glow, dog, bell rope still, goose silent. You recite a smaller litany than earlier, no Latin now, just the names of things that mean still here. If the mind refuses to quiet, you take the pilgrim's advice and count saints to the pace of your breathing. You run out somewhere in the high numbers and start over not because you are pious, but because repetition polishes fear until it is only a smooth stone in the pocket. Can't sleep? Try counting saints instead of sheep. It's holier, and no livestock required. And so the inn holds. It is both haven and hazard, and has been told so by every shoulder that leaned on its posts. In the ledger of the night, it will never boast a clean column. There will be a theft somewhere, a bruise that blooms an interesting color, a candle someone let gutter too far before a quick hand saved the rush. There will be men who trusted too much and men who trusted not enough. And in the morning they will all eat the same bread and drink the same thin ale and pass under the same horseshoe into weather that is nobody's friend. But for these few hours between prayers, thieves' hooks, and the bucket pails, the inn does what it has always promised. It stacks human bodies against winter and worries and says, "We'll see you to dawn if you'll meet us halfway." Dawn at the inn doesn't so much arrive as negotiate its way in. It slips under the door first, a gray ribbon of chill air that noses along the rush-strewn floor and explores every gap in the boards. Then it taps the shutters with pale knuckles and asks the house if anyone intends to be respectable today. The house, which has endured snoring in 3 registers, a dice argument that ended under a table, and a goose with managerial ambitions answers with a collective groan. One rooster, an optimist with no friends, splits the gloom with a bragging crow. Two dogs roll to their feet, shake the night from their coats, and test the air for news. Someone coughs a cough with a history. Someone else, who has been bargaining with sleep since midnight, gives up and sits up, the straw sighing in complaint. The embers on the hearth glow like a treasure of quiet coals, a hoard of yesterday's heat. The wife is first to move. She's always first. She kneels, scoops ash aside with a practiced hand, and teases the red back toward orange with a twist of kindling and a patient breath. Smoke rises at once, blue, skeptical, and the room accepts it the way old bones accept weather, with a comment and a shrug. The smell changes from night's stale stew and tallow to morning's ember warmth, a fragrance of soot and beginnings. You awaken in parts. First, the ankles discovering that in sleep they negotiated a treaty with another traveler's feet and lost. Then the shoulders, as stiff as if you've been wearing your pack for 8 hours in a dream. Your back reports that the straw mattress was a landscape with geology, ridges, outcrops, and one suspiciously mobile hill that might have been the dog. A flea, energized by dawn like a monk by lauds, offers its devotions on your calf. You scratch, blink grit from your eyes, and discover your face smells faintly of smoke and someone else's pillow. Congratulations, you lived. The room conducts its inventory. The pilgrim sits cross-legged on his patch of straw and touches his rosary like counting the beads will also count the bruises. The merchant performs a purse ritual. Lift, weigh, open, squint, recount, retie, test the knot with a pull and a prayer to street whoever handles arithmetic. A pair of carters stretch their arms toward the rafters, joints crackling like kindling. The fiddler, whose bow played well past the hour of wisdom, wakes with a start and checks his instrument with the tender panic of a man who has once slept on something he loved and broken it. It's safe. He kisses the air above it anyway. Smells arrive in an order you'll recognize by noon. The sour tang of ale that didn't make it out of the mug. The ghost of onions from last night's pot. Damp wool steamed by the freshened fire. And the steady, earthy breath of animals seeping through the wall from the stables. Out back, hooves stamp frost, or mud, depending on which saint offended the weather. And a mule delivers a complaint that would read as poetry if you spoke mule. The stable lad clatters buckets in a way designed to wake the lazy and prove to the diligent that they are not alone. The inn itself wakes like an army, by function. The wife coaxes the pot into duty again, stretching the leftovers with water into a morning broth that knows where it came from and where it's going. She slices bread that could bludgeon a memory into obedience, lays it near the hearth to soften, and sets out mugs that will soon hold small ale thin enough to persuade even a saint to avoid sermons. The innkeeper performs a circuit with a ledger in his head, tables to wipe, embers to bank later, door to unbar when the light is honest, 2 chairs to scold for wobbling. He keeps an eye on the faces. The man who looks like he will claim he already paid. The woman who looks like she will refuse to eat unless she can first wash her hands. The soldier who looks like the morning will surprise him by existing. Travelers become people again as they stand. The soldier reattaches his swagger. The pilgrim chooses a humble expression he will keep until the road corrects it. The merchant, who slept hugging his pack like it might elope, tries on professional cheer. A young apprentice who spent the night in a window nook unfolds like a letter and tests his legs, then tests his purse, then tests his pride, present, wounded but alive. Children rub their eyes and discover with dismay that morning itchiness exists. One shares a blanket with a dog who declines to relinquish it. The child negotiates with a scrap of sausage and wins a narrow victory. There's water, always colder than sense. A bucket by the back door has a skin of ice certain weeks of the year, and every month the water chooses violence. You splash your face, gasp in the accent of a person temporarily convinced by mortality, and feel the world tilt toward clarity. There is a comb on a nail-wooden, wide-toothed, more full of stories than hygiene, and you run it once through your hair, because the ritual matters more than the result. A woman uses the corner of her cloak as a towel, and mutters an observation about the inn's climate that would embarrass a priest. The wife pretends not to hear and offers her a clean rag anyway. Breakfast isn't a meal, it's a truce. The stew, now dignified as pottage, breathes a gentle steam and tastes of last night's good intentions and this morning's compromises. Bread softens at the edge of the hearth until it can be persuaded into chewing. The ale is watered into small ale because the road is long, and daylight punishes drunk men with practicalities. You take a bench, wrap your fingers around a warm mug, and do the work of becoming a traveler again. Someone passes you a heel of bread with a grace that suggests friendship where none exists. You pass a scrap to the child with the blanket-thieving dog. The dog loves you more than you deserve. Conversation at dawn is an economy of syllables. Weather first, always. Looks like rain, smells like frost, feels like both. Eyes read the sky like scripture. Cloud height, wind direction, the particular gray that means mud from here to the next decent bridge. Next comes the road, bandits near the old quarry. The ford is high. The toll at St. Bride's Gate is 2 pennies today, unless you're charming. You are not charming. Markets follow, and rumor after them. Wool deer up north. Fish plentiful last week on the coast. A baron's men seen drilling on a field that's loved oats more than soldiers for 100 years. Pilgrims trade shrine, talk relics that glow, or used to. Chapels where bells ring themselves on certain feasts. A hermit who tells fortunes to anyone who brings him cheese. Nobody believes everything, but everyone believes something. Belief itself is a lamp when the morning is stingy. The innkeeper does his math aloud without numbers. He stacks trenchers, wipes tables, and charges not for last night's music, but for this morning's heat. A merchant offers to pay in kind tin pins, a length of ribbon that almost looks like silk in sleepy light. And the wife considers the ribbon against her wrist, then shakes her head and points at the coin dish. A soldier swears he paid twice last night. You drank twice last night, the innkeeper says, untroubled. A compromise emerges that satisfies neither mathematics nor justice but allows everyone to keep moving. In the yard, the stables conduct their own parliament. Horses snort fog into the dawn and stamp a verdict onto the question of patience. Harness jingles like a handful of winter stars. The stable lad moves with a speed earned by experience. Left rein first on that gelding, he bites. Blanket off before saddle on this mare. She kicks interference. Oats last for the donkey, he negotiates. Chickens scatter underfoot like dropped gossip. The goose, who has slept better than anyone human, patrols with a proprietary honk and pecks a carter's boot for sport. The carter salutes the goose with the second most obscene gesture he knows. The goose considers the treaty and declines. Pilgrims gather by habit near the door. They adjust their hoods, line up their staffs like a forest with intentions, and trade blessings like men swap knives, briefly, with respect. Someone pins a scallop shell to someone else's cloak. Someone else ties a little bell at the hem for the road to hear. A woman traces the sign of the cross on her children's foreheads and adds an extra line on the littlest because he refused his stew. The littlest giggles, tasting pottage and piety together. A man in a broad hat produces a small bottle that glows like amber. He claims it's a saint's bone water. No one asks which saint. The question is impolite at this hour. Merchants think in lists. They tally stock with a finger in the air and a gaze that sees through canvas. 3 bolts of rough linen, 5 dozen hooks, 7 jars of dye that will have opinions if shaken. They check the straps on their packs as if straps had hidden lives. They look at the cartwheels. The cartwheels look back and say, "We'll discuss this in the next mud hole." Deals are made at the door that should have been made last night. A jar swapped for a ride. A song traded for directions. A blessing exchanged for a coin because everything is a market if you're awake enough to see it. Payment settled, bundle shouldered. The door bar slides up with a sound that belongs to morning. A wooden throat clearing. Cold air insists on its rights and pours in like a guest who knows exactly where the good chair island. The wife stands nearest the hearth and allows it to happen because the house must breathe. She hands out last things advice, a rag of extra bread, a look that controls geese and watches the road take her work away. You steal 3 breaths beside the newly revived fire, because that's what travelers do. Hoard small comforts like saints, hoard stories. The child with the dog tumbles past you toward the yard. The dog hesitates at the threshold, glances back at you with a specific grief of a creature leaving heat, and then flings himself into the day because loyalty has a leash. The fiddler lingers longer, rubbing his strings with resin, hearing the tune of the road in his head before his feet have found it. He hums. The hum collects dust motes in the beam of light and turns them into music. Before you go, you take inventory again. Always. Purse, pack, knife, boots, belt strapped through the second loop, cloak pin snug, a sprig from the beam mint today. You decide to smell like the idea of clean. A half-formed prayer to St. Christopher, or to the god of not falling in ditches. You touch the door frame on your way out, the way a man touches a friend's shoulder. Thanks without words. The inn answers by being itself warm in the middle, drafty at the edges, smelling of perseverance. Outside, the world is intent on being bigger than you. The road runs away like a dare. Frost has painted the ditch grass with a mean glitter, or rain has decided that mud is the proper greeting for the souls of honest folk. The sky considers sunlight and decides to roll it out slowly, a miser tipping pennies onto a counter. Crows discuss governance in the oak by the gate. The verdict is always more bread. A cart creaks forward, and the creak is a hymn you already know. You fall into the procession that isn't one until it is. Two carters arguing about where the ruts are deepest. A pilgrim who sings a psalm in a key the road invented. A merchant counting without numbers. A soldier whistling a tune that has bragged in worse places. Feet find a rhythm that makes sense of distance. Breath lines up with thought. The goose, for reasons unrevealed, escorts everyone as far as the hedge, then returns to the yard with the satisfaction of a steward whose domain has been inspected. Behind you, the inn exhales the last of its guests and inhales its chores. The wife hauls the old straw to the midden, beats blankets that release a small storm of yesterday into the air, resets pallets with the dignity of a queen laying out crowns for lesser kings. She wipes tables with authority. She scolds a candlestick that dripped on the bench. She stands a moment at the door and listens to the road's gossip come back on the wind. Inside, the innkeeper tallies nights against days in the way men do who know survival is profit enough. You look back only once, because looking back makes the road stretch like a cat and add a mile for impertinence. The signboard creaks in a new breeze and shows you its boar or cow or heroic dog again. It seems to wink. Or perhaps that's the smoke from the chimney miming humor. Either way, you smile with the part of your face not currently occupied with being cold. Will you remember the inn is comfort? Not exactly. You will remember it as a machine for continuing to live, staffed by two priests of the practical sacraments, heat, food, and somewhere to lie down. You will remember the pottage that tasted like hope dunked in yesterday, the bread that was improved by stubborn chewing, the ale that apologized for itself while being necessary. You will remember snoring in stereo and fleas with ambition, the way gossip warmed hands as well as mugs, the way the door bar sounded like the world becoming less accidental. You will remember paying for a bed and receiving a night, which is a different currency entirely. You will also remember the joke you made to yourself, because jokes earned in discomfort stick. You didn't get rest. You got experience points in endurance. Consider yourself leveled up. +1 to not dying in ditches, +2 to sharing blankets with strangers, proficiency gained in goose avoidance. And then you stop remembering, because the road finally demands all of you. You bow your head against a miserly wind, hitch your pack higher, and put your right foot in front of your left, because that's how pilgrimages, markets, errands, and histories get done. Behind you, the inn turns back into a hearth for someone else's morning. Ahead of you, another signboard leans into another evening. Between them stretches a country of nights and dawns, some holy, some ridiculous, all survivable if you are lucky, stubborn, and quick with a joke. Out here, dawn is not a promise. It's an invitation. The medieval inn accepts it on your behalf and sends you into it with a belly warmed, a pack accounted for, and a story half told. The rest you will write with your feet. A medieval inn wasn't just a roof with ambitions and a stew with memory. It was a nerve center smoky, loud and gloriously unreliable, where information traveled faster than any horse. The door wasn't merely a door. It was a hinge between villages, parishes, markets, and entire kingdoms. Step across the threshold, and you didn't only find heat, you found the news. Picture the common room in full swing, not at its rowdiest, but at its ripest. The hour when mugs sit half-drained, bellies are warm, and tongues loosen into usefulness. This is the moment the innkeeper leans his elbows on the counter and becomes, without ceremony, the editor-in-chief of the district. He knows who came by yesterday, who's due tonight, which cart crashed at the bend by St. Martin's Cross, and which toll gate just doubled its fees because someone's lordling woke up ambitious. Ask him anything, and he'll answer in the only currency that matters: details, tapping a finger on wood to mark the headlines. His wife, the managing editor, adds corrections from across the room with the force of an errant ladle. No, it was Tuesday, not Monday. And it wasn't a cart, it was two. And the mule is fine. Thus, the record is amended. You can watch news move through the inn like the weather. Carters bring road reports with the accuracy of men who measure life in ruts. The West Ford is ankle-deep at most, but the bank is sly. A peddler drifts in with the perfume of another county clinging to his cloak and pours gossip the way a man pours sauce generously, everywhere. A pilgrim breathes out a miracle from a shrine 3 weeks away. The miracle changes shape by the end of the night and grows legs by morning. 2 soldiers on leave tell you what the captain meant and what he didn't, and if you listen, you'll learn whether it's safer to sleep on the right or left side of the road when the moon is thin. The fiddler, who's seen 20 towns this year, sprinkles rumors like spice. A fair extended here, a bishop ill there. A new market grant that rearranged the map in a scribe's tidy hand. Illiteracy never stopped a medieval inn from posting the news. If there is a beam, there is a ribbon tied to it. Blue for a birth, black for a death, green for a betrothal if the bride's aunt is showy. There's a notch on the post near the door where travelers carve their marks, not names, but signs. A fish for a fisherman, a pair of shears for a fuller, a crooked star for that one tinkerer who insists on being dramatic. They don't mean much to strangers, but to those who know, they're breadcrumbs on the road. Sometimes a bit of parchment flutters on a peg, sealed with wax, and an instruction. To be read aloud. Enter the inn's other job title: reader. A clerk, a monk, or the innkeeper's lad with a year of letters sounds the words into the room while mugs quiet themselves for the ceremony. A will, a warning, a tax. Laughter when the Latin misbehaves. Oaths when the fee does. The inn functions as a hiring hall and caravan builder. A merchant with 2 pack animals asks for 3 companions to brave the forest bend that eats loners. A mason in search of work sets his hammer on the table like a banner. A widow needs 2 strong backs to help with a roof. She pays in bread and a sack of last year's beans. Apprenticeship starts here more often than in a guild hall. Hands are inspected. Questions asked. Can you keep time? Can you keep quiet? Can you count? And a boy leaves in the morning, walking behind a man who will become his master because their handshake is held. Deals are inkless but binding. A traveling notary might pass through twice a year. In his absence, the inn supplies witnesses. We were there, the innkeeper and wife will say, and that is evidence enough for the road. A contract can be a promise spoken over the shared trenchers. Delivery by Michaelmas. 40 hooks and a coil of rope. Payment in coin or wool. 2 witnesses and a saint's name for luck. The ledger is the memory of the room itself. The ceiling listens. If anyone forgets, the wife remembers what was promised, what was paid, who lied, and who will not be fed until they tell the truth. Information is traded the way everything else. Island directions cost a story. A warning costs a drink. A carter will tell you which miller cheats the scales if you pass him the mustard. A shepherd draws a map in spilled ale-2 hills. A hedge, a stream that doubles back like a snake and slides the mug to you like a secret. The fiddler accepts coin for a ballad, but he values a rumor more. By tomorrow he'll be singing it 2 towns away, and the countryside will be humming the news before the reeve has heard a word. And then there is gossip, the inn's true fuel. It arrives laughing, leaves limping, and can't be killed, even with facts. A miller's daughter was seen with a tanner. Immediately the town imagines a wedding, a scandal, and 6 future children, all guilty of freckles. A reeve looked too long at a cart of apples. Now he's a thief and an enemy of orchards. A man coughed twice on a Thursday by sundown. He is dying. By midnight he had died and risen. By dawn he is in line for breakfast, surprised to learn of his adventures. There are the permanent rumors, too. The well by the ash tree is unlucky. The lane near the yew is haunted by a monk. The blacksmith's cat is a witch who cheats at dice. The cat sleeps through the accusation and wins another game. Trending topics exist without the word. Tonight's top 3. The toll at St. Bride's Gate, up 2 pennies. The bridge at Larkford, downriver post cracked, don't linger. And a traveling bone seller with a relic so holy it glows if you believe it hard enough. Counter-programming. A local baker swears he can make rye rise without cheating. The room considers this a personal affront and orders a loaf for proof tomorrow. Hashtag number prove it, said aloud as prove it, Thomas. The inn is not afraid of modern comparisons. It invented them. The innkeeper is the algorithm. He decides what you see first. His wife is the moderation team. She deletes fights with a ladle. Hierarchies exist, but here they meet at the same table. The petty noble at the end of the board pretends not to hear the peddler's opinion of him, which is wise, because the peddler has 15 more. The parish priest passes through and learns what the next village thinks of his sermon. He resolves to shorten it by a third and add a story about St. Cuthbert wrestling a fish. 2 guildsmen from different towns test each other with a question about prices that is also a duel. They end with a promise to act surprised when they meet next week at market and strike the same deal in different words. Love stories start at inns, or at least they try. A merchant's daughter with a laugh like the top of a bell listens to a soldier describe a town she'll never see. For a moment, she's there. A widow compliments the cooper's hands and orders 2 small casks with a glance that means 3. A pair of pilgrims discover they share a shrine and a favorite saint. By morning, they'll share a path. The inn sees all of it, winks once, and forgets nothing. If anything comes of it, the wife will know first, and the innkeeper will know second. If nothing comes of it, the fiddler will pretend something did, and the room will be grateful. The post, when it happens here. Not the grand royal couriers in scarlet, those thunder through and ignore mugs, but the ordinary trade of letters, folded paper with a dab of wax, a name braver than the addressee's reading skills, and a coin to guarantee a stranger's honesty. Someone always agrees to carry it as far as St. Milburga's, and from there, someone else will say as far as the ford, and somewhere in the chain, the letter learns to walk by itself. Sometimes it arrives. Sometimes it marries a pocket. The inn records neither outcome. It simply keeps the traffic moving and escorts hope to the door. Songs do the work that paper can't. Ballads are newspapers with better choruses. A singer lifts his bow, and the room hushes, because this is where the day becomes a story. He sings of a lord who taxed his people until his horse threw him into the mill pond. Funny, because everyone knows 3 such lords and 2 such ponds. He sings of a baker who cheated measures and was haunted by a flour ghost until he learned to weigh with his heart useful, because Thomas the rye innovator is listening. He sings of a highwayman who spared a widow and stole from a miser aspirational, like most myths. Between verses, the room trades analysis. That's not how it happened. It is now. The inn is also a tribunal of the ordinary. Lost and found is settled with witnesses. Whose knife? Mine. Prove it. It's short by a finger, and the hilt smells like onion. Proven. A spilled secret is swept up and portioned out into smaller, more manageable secrets and delivered to those who need to know everyone. A grievance airs itself, gets 3 opinions and a proverb, and goes to bed less angry. A marriage dispute is given 2 mugs and a table near the fire where people remember they once thawed together. The inn can't grant annulments, but it can loan patience in half mugs. Then there's the bulletin board nobody writes on, but everyone reads, the bar. Not the counter, the bar of stories repeated until they set. Do not sleep near the door in winter. You will wake with your eyebrows frozen to a draft. Do not insult a goose. Do not brag about dice while holding dice. If the innkeeper's wife says enough, she is not asking for your opinion. If a man says his relic glows, ask him to blow out the candle. If you must run, run toward the light and away from the pig. These rules have been tested. They are the highway code of survival. The toll is humility. Outside, the yard is its own newsroom. Teamsters compare wheel grease as if comparing pedigrees. A shepherd spreads a cloak on a fence and maps the heath with pebbles, explaining where the gorse bites and where the stream pretends to be shallow and is not. 2 women trading eggs for needlework trade stories at a higher speed than a gallop. Children act out the news in a dumb show. The fight from last night replicated with sticks and honorary titles. The dog played by the actual dog, who takes his role very seriously. Even the goose contributes commentary, which is mostly me, but timely. Corrections happen in the morning, of course, when sobriety is reinstated with bread. The wife announces them over ladles. The fair at Brightwell is next Sunday, not tomorrow. The soldiers were not recruiting. They were lost. The price of salt has not doubled. You were robbed by a man who smiled. The miller's daughter was not with the tanner. She was with the tanner's cousin, which is an upgrade. The room accepts these errata with good grace because it has already invented new errors to replace them. News, like stew, is best when stirred. Occasionally, authority arrives with a seal and announces itself. A reeve posts a proclamation about weights and measures. The innkeeper nods and places his biggest mug right under it, as if for saint's water. A traveling justice takes testimony at the corner table. The room becomes a court with better seating. Fines are levied. Promises are taken. The fiddler plays quietly, like a man chewing respectfully. When they leave, the bar invents a better version of the verdict and tells it 3 ways, 2 of which are righteous and 1 of which is funny. The inn also keeps a calendar more reliable than the churches, a weather memory calendar. Ask when the snow came last year, and 3 men point to the same nail in the beam and say, "When the nail was bright with breath, the sheep moved inside." Ask when to plant, and a woman taps the bench. When the bench remembers your knees again, which is to say, when it's warm enough to sit without cursing. The room collects these measurements and hands them out in handfuls to anyone whose eyes look like they'll be fooled by a sky. Every so often a stranger brings a story too large for the inn to keep. A ship from a land whose name tastes like spice. A plague rumor that snuffs candles with a glance. A king's death carried on a rider's foam-flecked horse, the news barebacked and shivering. The inn steadies, the story feeds it, warms it, sets it by the fire while the room adjusts its heartbeat. People count food. People count loved ones. People count the miles home. Then, when they can breathe again, someone says something small and useful. The ford is lower at noon, and the world resumes its ordinary miracles. Nothing in an inn stays still. Not stew, not gossip, not truth. Everything moves, from mouth to ear, to road, to song, to memory, and back to mouth. That motion is the point. A man can sleep in a hedge, if sleep is all he wants. But he comes to an inn for the friction of other lives, the spark of someone else's map, the heat of argument, the glimmer of a story that makes his own boots feel lighter. The bed may creak, the straw may itch, the fleas may write their names on his ankles. But the talk, the talk, quilts him better than blankets. So when you think of a medieval inn, don't picture only the smoky beams and the snoring in stereo, though by all means treasure the image of 3-part harmony with a bass goose. Picture the inn as a humming junction box where paths, rumors, markets, and moods plug in and light up. The innkeeper curates. His wife fact-checks with a spoon. The fiddler publishes. The dog moderates. The goose escalates. News is swallowed with ale, corrected with bread, and carried away on foot. By the time you shoulder your pack and make for the door, you're not the same traveler who arrived dusty and deaf to the world. You leave with roads folded into your pocket, a weather forecast disguised as a proverb, a warning about a toll, a song you didn't know you'd learned, and a rumor you swear you won't repeat. You will. Behind you, mugs clink. Ahead of you, hedgerows lean in as if eavesdropping. The inn returns to its incessant translation, turning lives into stories, and stories back into lives, so that when you reach the next crossroads and the next smoky doorway, you'll already speak the language. Because that's what an inn truly is. Not just a place where people sleep, but a place where the countryside learns to speak to itself. By now you can feel the heat of the hearth on your shins, the itch of straw on your calves, and the social gravity of a room that never quite stops humming. You've arrived at dusk, haggled for a sliver of mattress, survived the democracy of elbows, drifted in and out to the lullaby of fiddles and fistfights, whispered a prayer against thieves and sparks, and woken to embers, animals, and the thin mercy of watered ale. What we've walked through together isn't just a tour of creaky beams and smoky rafters. It's the anatomy of a medieval institution that stitched the map together, one tankard, one rumor, one shared blanket at a time. Inns were more than shelter. They were hinges on which entire journeys swung. Without them, the road was a string of hazards, river fords, dark hedgerows, and the kind of quiet that meant don't stop. With them, travel transformed from solitary risk to communal ritual. The inn standardized chaos. It set prices loosely, rationed warmth creatively, and delivered services that were part necessity, part theater. A place for bodies to thaw, for beasts to feed, for deals to breathe, for news to multiply. A traveler didn't simply pass through an inn. The inn passed through the traveler. Smoke in the cloak, stories in the head, a fresh bruise of experience on the ribs. Think of what an inn concentrated in one smoky box. Security by numbers. Sleeping alone on the verge was a dare to wolves, weather, and men with long knives. Sleeping with 40 strangers under one leaky roof was a packed, imperfect safety, crowd-sourced vigilance. A hand on your pouch, a shoulder against your shoulder, a bucket by the hearth. Primitive systems, yes, but systems nonetheless. Commerce in miniature. Those benches were merchant stalls by night. A muttered price became a roadworthy contract. A loaf traded for a rumor traded for a route traded for a chance at tomorrow's profit. Dice took coins. Songs took sadness. Both left change. News without paper. Before broadsheets, there were ballads. Before bulletins, there were top briefings. A fiddler could move information 40 miles faster than a courier because he carried it in a tune people insisted on remembering. The innkeeper's counter was an editorial desk. His wife's ladle, a ruthless fact-checker. Belonging that did not require invitation. Pilgrims, soldiers, widows, drovers, peddlers, all took turns being the main character and the chorus. You didn't choose your bedmates or your bench neighbors. You learned to share breath and bread anyway. In the common room, hierarchy shrank, never gone, but forcibly seated. Even the worst parts of an inn fleas, snores, and moral acoustics tell you something essential about medieval life. Privacy was a luxury word, comfort a daydream, cleanliness an event. People learned to ration sleep like salt, and to trust warmth over dignity. They mastered the art of good enough stew to keep moving, good enough bedding to wake alive, good enough truth to cross a border, good enough strangers to become allies for one anxious night. It wasn't cozy, it was cohesive. And if we pan forward to the present, past glass lobbies, past swipe cards, past climate control set to artificial autumn, you can still see the inn peeking out from behind the hotel's polished grin. The front desk is the innkeeper's post, minus the splinters. Name? How long? Coin? Now? ID? How many nights? Credit card? The ledger has gone digital, but the ritual is medieval. The concierge is the innkeeper's wife, omniscient, undefeated, and allergic to your nonsense. In one breath. Directions, dangers, a dinner reservation, and whether your plan is bad, she fixes it. The lobby is the common room with upgraded lungs. People still arrive with stories and leave with more. Now they exchange meeting decks instead of wool prices, post to a feed instead of a fiddler, and complain about Wi-Fi as if a saint once promised them bandwidth. The continental breakfast is thin stew that learns to stand up straight, complete with a waffle iron that squeaks like a medieval hinge. The watered ale became coffee. The bread got a toaster. The chicken, mercifully, retired. The corridor is the regulated version of the dormitory. Doors instead of curtains, key cards instead of a shove. Your neighbor still snores. The walls simply lie about how much you can hear. Even our complaints are medieval in costume. Room too cold, room too hot, pillow too hard, noise too loud, bed too soft. Choose your heresy. We grumbled to a front desk that called itself hospitality, while the medieval traveler grumbled to a man who called himself Thomas. Both want the same thing, to keep you returning. Both know the truth. No one remembers perfection, but everyone remembers being helped. And while modern hotels sell privacy as an entitlement, you can't check out of the old lesson completely. We travel better together. Our loyalty programs are the new caravan. Our ride shares the new muster at dawn. Our review cites the new benchside warnings. Crowd, sourced like last night's gossip, some of it right. Most of it interesting. Even the fire exit map on the back of your door is the rational descendant of a medieval bucket by the hearth and a wife who smacked your hand when you reached for a candle the wrong way. What we lose, of course, when we gain insulation and antiseptic light, is the closeness that makes a map feel spoken. The medieval inn pressed a country into a room until strangers could smell each other's lives. Your news came warm from someone's mouth. Your warning bore a fingerprint. Your lullaby had muddy boots. You learned the road by hearing it breathe. Today, the screen in your palm knows 1,000 roads, but it does not share your bread. So, what do you carry out of that smoky doorway and into your climate-controlled present? Carry the discipline of enough. Enough warmth to be kind. Enough food to be generous. Enough alertness to be safe without being small. Carry the curiosity that made people listen before they judged. There was no skip ad on the fiddler, and sometimes the ad was the news. Carry the humor that made indignities survivable. The flea that crowned itself king. The goose that enforced curfew. The neighbor who annexed half your blanket and declared marriage by occupation. Laughter was insulation when walls couldn't be. Carry, too, the respect for ordinary risk. The medieval inn taught a nightly fire drill of the soul. Where's the water? Where's the door? Who's your ally if the rafters sneeze sparks? We've delegated those worries to sprinklers and signage and good. Bless regulations, but the muscle that scans a room for kindness and exits is still worth flexing. And, maybe, on your next trip, practice a small, safe act of medieval hospitality. Offer the spare charging port. Trade a recommendation without expecting 5 stars back. Ask the desk how their night is, and mean it. Share a story that isn't optimized. You won't recreate the common room, but you'll tilt your night toward company instead of mere occupancy. Because in the end, inns shaped more than travel. They shape community and transit. They prove that a road is not only something you walk on, it's something you talk on. They made the miles between towns feel shorter, and the miles between lives feel crossable. They took the raw material of movement, mud, fear, hunger, and made it human. A bowl, a bench, a rumor, a song, a place to be safe with almost strangers. From that patchwork came the possibility of tomorrow. So the next time you swipe into a spotless room and frown at a mattress that doesn't remember your preferred cloud density, pause, listen. Somewhere, faintly, a goose honks in historical protest. And if you still feel a complaint warming in your throat, try this benediction instead. So next time you complain about a lumpy mattress, remember, at least you don't have to share it with a chicken. Thanks for traveling with History Lullaby. If this night left a little smoke in your hair and a song in your pocket, you're welcome. Subscribe, ring the bell, and we'll hold a bench for you at the next crossroads, where the stew is honest, the stories are generous, and the snoring comes in stereo.